Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Better Managers Briefing. I'm Sandra, the Chief Executive of the CMI, and each Friday at this time, we try to bring you views on topics that really matter in management and leadership. And today, I'm delighted to welcome two companions as we explore corporate reputation. What does it mean and why does it matter? So if I could first please welcome Jane Wakely, who is the lead CMO for Mars, and Sandra Macleod, who is the group CEO of Echo. So welcome to Jane and to Sandra.
Thank you, Anne.
Hello there. Hi.
Lovely to have you both here. So, corporate reputation, is that even the right name? What does it mean to you? Why does it matter? Well, Sandra, why don't we start off with your thoughts?
Okay, thank you, Anne. I think very simply, there are three reasons. I could go on and on, but certainly three key reasons reputations matter. One, because reputation leads to trust, and that drives behavior. We know that, we prove it, we see it time and time again, and behavior matters. Whether it's internal or external, behavior matters. So number one. Number two, reputation has many, many facets. It's in the eyes of the beholders. It's in the eyes of the stakeholders that really matter for organizations for their survival. So it's reputation for what, among whom, for what purpose. Yeah? Reputation for what, among whom, for what purpose. So you start to think about the many dimensions that it touches. And then last but not least is reputation is valuable. Reputation dividend has shown that it's worth 20 to 30% of market caps across the FTSE and S&P, and it's a valuable asset. And as such, it needs the systems, the processes, and the discipline in place as any other asset would do. And it tends to be woefully left to chance. So three reasons why it matters.
Right, very important reasons. But Jane, what's your take? And what about the word corporate reputation? What do you think?
Yes, look, I mean, corporate reputation is on everybody's agenda at the moment. And the main reason at Mars we consider corporate reputation to be important is simply talent. You know, people, particularly in recent years, have increasingly wanted to show trust in those environments, you know, that are closer to their control, and who you work for, who you choose to spend your time with, who you purchase with, is an increasing concern for associates, for partners, and of course for consumers. So, you know, attracting the right talent, attracting talent that wants to make a difference is critical in our own associate base, but also with all the many, many partners, suppliers, and stakeholders we work with. So that's the main reason it's important. However, I must admit, I would like to reframe the name a little bit, because I think the danger is when we talk of corporate reputation, that's an outcome. Corporate reputation is an outcome of being a good citizen in the world. It's not the end in itself. We don't do it just for corporate reputation. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And I think, you know, the trick here is, or the real issue at stake is, why do companies exist? What are they there to achieve? What's their deep purpose? You know, what does success look like? How are their executives measured? And therefore, for me, it's really corporate reputation is an outcome, but it's not the sole reason for driving action. The reason you drive action is when you really believe in something and it's critical to your business. And so, yes, that's the way I like to think about it. And I, you know, to make a meaningful and measurable difference, I think companies that have purpose, have real soul, are the ones that actually we're seeing drive corporate reputation, you know, up in leaps and bounds, and that's why.
Mm-hmm. So it's more about purpose, and many would say that COVID has made this even more important. But then there are those that say, well, actually, it doesn't really matter because everybody's just trying to survive. So do you think that the companies that have behaved responsibly toward their stakeholders, their employees, customers, suppliers, do you think that their reputations and results will be enhanced? And how would you measure that beyond the financial performance? And conversely, are those that are behaving badly, not being good citizens, are they going to have longer term consequences? Sandra, what do you think?
That's a really good question, Anne. And I think as you highlighted, there are quite a few organizations that are just struggling to survive right now. And I think we need to recognize the difficulty that many are trying to survive this week, this year, up until Christmas and beyond. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is going to have reputation way down at the bottom of the scale. It'll be there, but it won't be among the top. But those that do have an eye to the future and those that want to be around past Christmas, it is a time for caring. And I think it's really interesting because I think we've seen COVID challenge organizations, challenge culture. It's tested, purpose. It's tested all these things. And those that are finally living up to their promises, saying, yes, we put people first. Well, do they? Have they been? Are they looking after their suppliers? Or are they delaying payments as long as they can? Are they looking after their partners? How are they looking after their customers? And I think it's putting a lot of things into relief. So you've always said X, are you behaving this way? Are you really living up to those commitments? Because a purpose is a commitment, it's a promise. How are organizations delivering on that? And I think what we've seen is certain organizations maybe take COVID as an excuse to either behave badly or take shortcuts. And so you think of Mike Ashley and what he tried to do with his retail outlets right at the beginning of the lockdown, trying to make a quick buck by calling it something else. Or when we see Sir Richard Branson with Virgin and saying, no, I need money, but he's backed up by all these big American companies. How do these things land up in terms of their reputation? And I think what you saw quite quickly were a lot of backlash. People saying, gosh, that isn't behaving the right way. That isn't committing in a responsible way. And, will people be sad if they suffer? Maybe not so much, maybe as they were before. And I think it's that issue of how much more loyalty are you gaining by actually caring for people and doing the right things, the things that Jane has been talking about. So you do see, there's a lot of comments about saints and sinners. Well, I mean, we do now expect saints to come through because this is a time of caring. If you can survive beyond Christmas, this is the time when you can really shine.
Sure. And Jane, your purpose is very important to you. Do you think that companies that embrace purpose at these times are going to perform, and how do you measure it beyond the financial performance? What's your experience at Mars?
Yes, look, I think authenticity and trust is never more important than in a crisis. And I think, the days of woke washing and not acting in line with what you say are long gone. There's no room for it. In a social media world, you are found out fast. And Sandra, you gave some brilliant examples there. So I think what's really important is that a company really defines what success looks like. And of course, success for any company starts with financial performance. Financial performance is the freedom that's required to act sustainably, to act in line with your purpose. But at Mars, interestingly, we've really developed how we measure success. As you know, Mars is one of the biggest private companies in the world, and one of the reasons for that is the Mars family that invest in Mars, believe that investing in the company is their best way to have a positive impact on the world. So we measure our success in 4 quadrants, basically. Of course, financial performance, as I've shared. We have what we call a quality growth measure, which looks at the future sort of tailwinds of our business. Is our business set up to grow in a quality way in the future? And then we have very substantial measurements that look at our impact on the environment, on society, where our leaders are held to account. And finally, trusted partnerships, and of course, corporate reputation. And all 4 of those aspects of measurement are deeply embedded in how we measure success. And I think we've just launched actually something called the Economics of Mutuality Foundation. And this is making public 10 years of deep research and work that Mars, together with many, many partners, has put together on trying to form a new form of capitalism. It's saying, the old form of capitalism where only the bottom line counts is long gone. But how do we make meaningful and measurable companies' impacts on the broader society and the broader world. And you know, for anyone that's interested to learn more, I'd really encourage you to join one of the talks, or really go and tap into all of that material, because there's some very practical tips on how we can make a more meaningful and measurable difference in that space.
Well, we'll certainly include it in the link to this broadcast. And by the way, speaking of links, if you'd like to join the CMI community, please click the link in the chat box, or in the discussion box. And if you'd like to ask a question, because we will be asking questions, please also click the link in your YouTube channel and you can submit your question. But first, my next question. So as we come out of COVID, are you going to see opportunities for this to increase? Do you think that the hard wiring of ESG, of the economics of mutuality, is going to become even more important as we recover? Or is it just going to be, no, you know, it's about survival, that Maslow's hierarchy? Sandra, what do you think? And if so, if we are going to, you know, recover well, how can we drive that? How can we make that hard wiring happen better?
Yeah. No, again, each of your questions are huge things in their own right. Again, if you go back to the concept of reputation, and as Jane says, it's very much it's an outcome, and it's an outcome of performance less expectations. So R equals P minus E. And what's happening is, even though, you know, if we're able to get goods to markets or services to markets and meet our customers' needs, what's happening is the E, the expectation, has changed fundamentally with COVID. And I do think that is a major change. And things like climate change, things like equity, you know, across the whole spectrum. Now people are saying, do you know what? No, we have to do more. And we actually want to work. We want to work with organizations that are doing more and changing. And it's systemic change. It's not just my CSR department. It is systemic change that people are looking for, and how you drive transformation and innovation, the sort of things that Mars has been doing in terms of saying, what is the connectivity to real innovation? That's coming through. And then also customers now are saying, we identify with the brands that we're choosing, and we want to know what's behind this. And we're contributing to a better world as well. So I think that for a whole load of reasons, the whole ESG purpose phenomenon is now very much, I mean, we see that with all our clients, very much on the top 10. It is discussed at boards. It's challenged because they have so many metrics and so many things they've been traditionally looking at, saying, well, how do we drive the change that we know we need? Because actually we won't survive. If we do not bring in these changes now, there is not a future for us in our traditional old ways. So I think there's a lot of things now that are quite existential for companies, some sooner than others. But this whole, I think now it's not a nice to have, it is definitely a need to have. And if boards aren't asking it, certainly investors are, and employees are, and obviously all your customers are as well. So I think this whole thing is now, it is on the agenda, it is being changed. And I think people are looking for that major change button to happen.
So R, I liked that formula. I just want to repeat that. So R equals P minus E. So reputation equals performance minus expectations. So Jane, coming out of COVID, is that the R going to be positive or negative? Where do you think companies are going to go?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting in lots of industry forums, and Anne, you and I are shared members of some shared forums. I do hear, the discussion of trade-offs. So I do hear many companies wrestling with, for example, should we put D&I on pause whilst we get our business, in order, future, for example. That, all of these discussions, the same with sustainability issues. And, for me, this trade-off is not a potential trade-off. We know, for example, that diversity and inclusion at the heart of a business drives performance. We know that if there's no world to do business in, or society breaks down, business has no role. So to me, the whole concept of trade-off is not a relevant one. I think we know we have to put social and environmental concerns right at the heart of business, and that is business's role in society, just as much as making profit, shareholder value. And therefore, let's see it as an opportunity for innovation, brilliance to come from, rather than a nice to do at the bottom of the management agenda. You know, in good times we invest, in bad times we disinvest. We can't think of it like that anymore. Time's too short on all these issues, and I think companies that really lead the way on this can truly shape you know, the future. And in fact, Mars's purpose, our phrase that we use internally, is the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. So to Sandra's point, we can each show behaviours and act in line with our beliefs. You know, we're just going to create a better world for everyone, and I think companies have a huge role to play in that.
Mm-hmm. And they have to take it seriously if they're going to survive and attract the talent, is what you're saying, that this is actually accelerating performance, not hampering performance, which obviously some short-termists are prone to dispensing with things at their peril.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got to take the reputation off a tick list and off a sort of you know, self-interested model and into where it becomes a true driver of performance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I know that many of our listeners really do care about this, but they wonder, as a manager or a leader in an organization, what can I do to up the importance of this agenda, not just the purpose agenda, but all of the purpose, the sustainability, the diversity, all of the things that we've been discussing about doing the right thing. What advice can you give them as to how they can make an impact in their organization? Maybe Sandra, starting with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. And again, there's so many things that are going on, from, you know, concern of mental health for our fellow colleagues, right the way through to, you know, this broader issue of equity and how we're going to help major unemployment and imbalances that we can start to see coming through already in our economy. And I think those are really big things to be thinking about. And you know, to Jane's point, you know, the saying that every journey starts with a single step, and I think it's those steps that now are important to take, not to leave behind. And within organizations, I mean, we just are so impressed because we come across people at all levels, whether it's, you know, your leadership at the managerial level or down at the employee level, who want to be part of that change, who want to help and want to see things move forward. And I think what I would say for those who do really want to be agents of change, and even if you find that maybe some of your colleagues, probably about 4 things that you can think about here. One, first and foremost, and this will be music to your ears, Anne, and to the team at CMI, but I think this issue of investing in training and development. And that's not just functional training, but it's also training around empathy, around recognizing, you know, stress signals, around recognizing signals of change and so on, internally and externally. And so I think this issue of being, you know, constant students, you know, we haven't stopped the day we leave university or the day we leave. We are constant students and we have to continually be so. And the more organizations encourage that, I think the better that will be. So definitely training and education and development right at the top, right the way through to the new skills that we're going to need, digital and all the rest of it. The other is, you know, I do think there is, you know, it's really important not to be that lone voice that's out there, but to build coalitions of support for something that you believe in strongly among your peers. I'm sure you'll also find a lot of interest for these sort of things among some of the newer employees or the millennials and Gen Zs that are in the organizations. They're in a hurry. They know that things have to happen. So again, a great opportunity to build coalitions with them. And those are often the entry-level people coming in, you know? So you invest in training and education, build coalitions. We've talked about behavior. Be the behavior that you're looking for. Yeah, don't just tell people, but actually show that and live it. And finally, and I would say that as a research organization, that use data and insight to help you on that journey. You know, no one's perfect. No one's there, you know, perfectly formed at the end of it. We're all on this journey, but actually show progress and maybe highlight areas that need additional support. or additional resources. But, data is there to help this whole process, definitely. So 4 things there that hopefully might be helpful.
So some great tips there. Jane, I know you have a lot of thoughts on this as well. What can individuals do to help this agenda and accelerate it?
Yeah, I think out of every crisis comes opportunity. And, as Sandra's recognized, I do want to just recognize that there's many, tragic events that have come out of COVID. But in any crisis, I think we learn more about ourselves and we learn more about what is possible. And I've been really amazed at some local entrepreneurs and, what they've learned, how they've pivoted their business. And I've also been equally, privileged to be part of a big organization and how we've responded. And I've got 4 Ps I want to talk about. The first is pulse. I think during a crisis, any crisis, and this one more than ever, you have to have a pulse of what's going on. And a pulse is no longer a retrospective look. It's a daily, hourly, real-time pulse on what's really happening. So we've really, for example, transformed our social listening capability across the world. We've really transformed how we listen to our associates and the challenges they have been, overcoming our suppliers. So having that sort of pulse is the first thing. Make it real time. The second thing is pivot. The reality is, I think in the last decade, we've seen shifts in customer base, we've seen shifts in shopping and media behavior that have never been seen before. And we've seen in COVID that acceleration. Everything is doubled down in transformational. And so pivoting your organization to the future and making sure you're really shifting resource to those changing trends at an appropriate pace, which means faster than you feel comfortable with, I think is my second. So pivot. Then my third P is purpose. And by purpose, I mean it in the broadest sense, the values that your company has, the values you want to be known by, the values you want your associates and partners to align with, and your deep set purpose. I think having that enables a level of entrepreneurialism and empowerment for your associates and your partners, because it's a framework. It's a very loose framework in one sense, but it's a very tight framework in another, because if you act in line with your purpose and your values and principles, you really can't go far wrong, and yet you can give tremendous freedom to your associates to act. And finally, performance. Like anything in business, you get what you measure, and we have to become, as I spoke about the economics of mutuality, we have to measure what's important to us. And therefore, the outputs of traditional companies' P&L is no longer enough. We need to be clear the broader set of metrics that are important to us as a company. So performance and measurement is my final P.
Well, that's great. Some great practical tips, each of you 4. I love that, and I love the P's because all of CMI's values, we have 4, begin with P. So yes. Some great advice. Well, we're going to open it up for questions, and our first question comes from Jenny, and she's asking both of you, what are the speaker's thoughts regarding the following? Ethical leadership can create innovation through building on social and human capital. Now, I suspect you might think similarly to Jenny, but Jane, what do you think of what Jenny's just said there?
Well, I couldn't agree more. So, innovation can come from anywhere, but I think, having that purpose at the heart, a set of values and principles, and surrounding yourself with amazing partnerships and talent that has diversity of thought and experience leads to amazing innovation. And I'm just thinking of maybe one I can talk about. I've been very privileged to be involved in the Lion's Share, which comes from a deep purpose Mars has, being, we've got a very large pet care division, and we know and we firmly believe in our hearts and our minds that having pets, for example, and animals in our lives makes human lives better. And I know, and your beloved dog I see on Facebook, so I know you agree with that too. But our purpose is to create a better world for pets. And anyway, as a result of that, we have tried to create movements around the world with other companies, and the lion's share is actually a movement that goes beyond companion animals. It also includes wildlife, and it's a partnership with the United Nations Development Fund. It's with many NGOs, but also many other corporate companies. And it's a partnership in which we're innovating in a space of trying to make a difference to the world for wildlife and wildlife habitats and companion animals. And that's an example where, honestly, some of the ideas and inspiration that's come out of that would never come without that group of people together. No one of us could have achieved some of the things that the lion's share have achieved on our own. And so that's a great example of Jenny's. I'm just reading her question in full. Spot on, Jenny.
Great. And Sandra, what are your thoughts?
We're all in danger of violently agreeing with each other. What I would add to this, though, and I suppose the concern that I have is that so many people are working from home. Some are now calling it living at work. Everything is blending, and there is that concern when you talk about tapping into innovation and the energy that you need to drive that. Is how do you do it in a remote, distant environment? Yeah, and that issue of the water cooler conversation or the energy that you get in a brainstorm when you're all together. If we can't recreate that, how do we do that? Because clearly, as Jenny says, great ideas, innovation, and also the energy will come from all directions. And I think this issue to ethical leadership is not just saying one group or one level, but it's opening it up to everyone in the organization. But how do you do that? How do you use technology to help support and drive that enthusiasm and that energy to support innovation? So I would raise that as a concern and just say this is something I think we all have to work on.
Yes, absolutely. Our next question is from Prasad. He asks, hi, do you think that some of the retail giants in the UK and the US who have been focused only on their financial interests and abused the contracts they had with their suppliers will have a significant adverse impact on their reputation and customer loyalty? Well, Sandra, what do you think about that?
It's come up before, even before COVID, when you had some of the big retailers flexing their muscles with small farmers or small holdings, and either pushing them out of business or pushing them to the brink and so on. And that's just not acceptable. And the more that comes through and people see that, and this issue of transparency, people say, no, if I'm shopping at Waitrose or Asda or wherever it is, I want to know that that farmer, that fair trade, whatever, that has been worked all the way through properly. And again, in line with the stated purpose and commitment. If they have no stated purpose, they have no ethical guidelines, then, it's the Wild West for them. But those who do, that's where the issue is. If you do it, you have to live it. And that's where you become unstuck. So I would say, do these, if you're going to abuse your relationships, do so with your eyes open and beware, because you will be unstuck.
And you mentioned some examples earlier on, and of course we had the example of Boohoo and the paying below the minimum wage, and that rocked their share price. Jane, what do you think? Do you think it's going to negatively impact?
Well, it's interesting. I can genuinely say I joined Mars almost 19 years ago now, and I joined for the brands and the business opportunity, but I've stayed for the values that I found just really match my own and the principles. And one of the values, one of the 5 principles that Mars holds dear to how we do business is mutuality. And I remember first learning about this when I joined Mars and reading all about Frank Mars' first expression of mutuality, which is written in this amazing all-company letter back in, I think it's 1939 or something like that. And it talks about only relationships or benefits that are mutual survive and are sustainable. And it puts mutuality at the heart of how the company wants to operate, i.e. you have to build those mutual benefits, be it with suppliers, be it with stakeholders, and there needs to be a mutuality of benefit, because otherwise it's only short-lived. And I fundamentally believe that companies that take shortcuts, and don't create mutuality with every element of their stakeholder group in time, will suffer, either financially, reputationally, or normally both. So
exactly. Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So that's a great insight there. And actually, our last question here comes from Namadi, and I think Namadi is very enamored of Jane, the concept that you mentioned on pulse, where you were saying you're measuring in real time. So I'd like to ask. He's asking each of you, how can universities apply the pulse you talk about? Is it different from the purpose? And if so, how is it different? So maybe Jane, to you first, and then Sandra, your thoughts on that.
Oh, I'd need to think about that a little bit, but maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about how we went about creating Pulse. So by Pulse, I mean be very in touch with the heartbeat of your associates and the consumers, and that means listening. It starts with listening. It starts with empathy. And one of the things we've revolutionized is, even 10 years ago, we'd have done focus groups. We'd have done, big consumer questionnaires. And one of the things we've moved to is real-time social listening. So right at the beginning of COVID, for example, we quickly really enacted at a massive scale across the world, listening to social media, looking at people's search queries, what they were concerned about pets, for example. I work in the pet care division of Mars. And that helped us understand all of our pet parents' concerns and the pain points they were experiencing, which ranged from things like, concern about could a pet pass on COVID-19? How should they care for a pet if they were ill? To, more day-to-day things like, I can't get out of my apartment and I need to walk my dog. My dog's going crazy. What can I do? How can we, all of these things. And I think, what was interesting is by having a real-time social listening aspect, it enabled us to flex our content, our products, our services very rapidly to respond to changing needs. And obviously there are times where needs don't change rapidly, but in a crisis, they really do. And so I wonder, just a thought, how in touch and how real-time your feedback is from the student population, for example, on how they're coping with some of the challenges of social distancing. What are the things that are on their mind in Freshers Week? The mind boggles, but I imagine, just by listening, we get a lot of insights that then perhaps we could act against to better help the student population in what's becoming the new norm.
That is a great insight and a great suggestion. Sandra, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, no, again, just building on that. And again, going back to the concept of reputation for what, among whom, for what purpose. Yeah. You'll think through your student population, those that are, local to you, right the way those that are international students. How are their needs? How are their concerns changing? How is their interest in degrees? Their interest in, the value of an education, what kind of degrees are going to be useful? How are they looking to the future? So there's a lot of great things you can do from social listening, absolutely. But right the way through to the business and the employment community. What are they looking for from today's graduates? There's greater collaboration, empathy, enthusiasm, innovation, all the things that they're asking for. Are universities producing that? So you've got your employee population, you have your employer population, so your students, your employers, you've got your fellow academics, how are you going to be the one that attracts the best and the brightest to your university? So there are a lot of different areas that you can focus on, and actually it's almost like a laser gun. Where do you want that laser to focus on, and on what sort of discussions and issues that are relevant for that particular group? So yeah, there's lots of things you can do.
So again, just listening to different audiences is a great way of learning. Well, you've both been fabulous. You've been very insightful, lots of tips and lots of sort of new ways of thinking about reputation and what matters now. So thank you both. I hope that you've enjoyed listening, and enjoy the weekend. Take care. And I will see you next Friday, where I'll be interviewing some main public sector leaders who've been really at the front line of the crisis. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful weekend. And thanks to Jane and Sandra.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. Bye-bye. Thank
Cheers,
you.
cheers.